So I get a call one afternoon, and he says, "Hi, I'm Kenny Loggins, and I was told I should give you a call." And I said, "Yeah." I said, I remember that conversation. He said, "Well, I'd sure like to get together and have you hear some of my tunes." And I said, "That'd be great." So he shows up one evening and knocks on the door. I open the door, and here's this 6-foot dude standing there with a beard and braces on his teeth, parting his hair, and wearing some Levi's that looked like he might have just got off the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of shocked because I wasn't expecting this particular person dressed the way they were come
Exactly.
in. And we sat and talked for a while, and he was very personable. And I said, "Well, may I hear some of your tapes?" And he goes, "Well, I don't have any tapes." Oh, I said, "That's odd." I said, "Don Ellis said you had some tapes." He said, "No, I don't have any tapes." I said, "Well, why don't you pull out your guitar and just, play some tunes?" "I don't own a guitar." "You don't have tapes and you don't own a guitar?" And I thought to myself, "Well, is this a joke? Somebody's playing a joke on me." And he said, "No, I don't have a guitar." So I said, "Well, I've got a couple over here in the closet, a steel string and an acoustic nylon string. One of those work for you?" He goes, "Yeah." So I gave him the nylon string. I said, "There's a tape recorder." I said, "I'll press the button and you sing into the mic." Kind of reminds me of "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?"
Right.
So anyway, he sang some songs. He sang Pooh Corner. He sang Danny's song. He sang Wytheville, My Love's Gonna Tumble on You. A couple of other songs, Black Smoke. And
in that great voice of his.
Yeah, well, in those days, we were all younger.
Yeah.
And his voice was, I liked his voice. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to work with him. Anyway, we recorded the songs. He left after we had some dinner, and my wife said, "So what do you think?" And I said, "Man, I just don't know what to think, because Danny's song is a folk song. House of the Corner is a folk song. These are all songs that I think, well, Peter, Paul, and Mary is over with, and the Dixon Trio is over with, and I said, I'm just not sure what I'm going to do with this." But anyway, after a couple of days, I invited him back, and we sat down from the tape recorder and started kind of playing around. I didn't know whether he could even play guitar, to be honest with you. He didn't have one when he came. So I started playing around with some of his songs. I gave him one of my guitars, and we started going through Pooh Corner at first, and I thought to myself, that song sounds great, and it had already been recorded by the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and it was too upbeat rock sounding. It was just, for me, the groove and the arrangement did not match what the song was about. So I started playing with him and looking toward maybe making it more of an ethereal kind of song, more childlike, and I wanted to see how well he played. So I started playing a more Baroque kind of sound to it, especially on the instrumental. I figured if he can play this stuff, he can play. So we worked out an arrangement, which he spent a little time working, but he got it, and it sounded good. Well, my thought was I wanted to see if he could really play the guitar. So I started working on the arrangement, which was more of a Baroque kind of sound.
Right.
When I say Baroque, more of like My Sweet Lady Jane, how the Stones had approached that particular song. I approached it from a similar point of view to see how well he could play, and he did a great job. So, after that, I began to ask him, how do you make a living if you don't own a guitar? And he says, "Well, I work for this publishing company, and I make $100 a week. And if they want an Elton John song, I can write an Elton John song." So he started singing like Elton John. I went, "Whoa." He said, "If they need a Leon Russell song, I can do that. He'd sing like Leon Russell." And I was just absolutely amazed that he had the kind of epiglottal that could change in character. And it gave me the idea at that point in time. I said, I wasn't able to sell records doing country rock because of the problem I just told you.
Right.
What if I had an artist that could sing different musical styles and make the music more diverse, which would allow them to get or have a better opportunity at getting a hit record if there was more to choose from? Which was the main reason I wanted to try to work with Kenny. I thought he had the talent as a singer, the question would be getting the songs. And from there, we began to work together. I gave him some of my songs. I gave him Listen to a Country Song, Peace of Mind. Gave him Nobody But You, a couple of other things, to give him a chance to do more upbeat rock and roll, a more gospel sound. He wrote a song with Michael Mardian called, what was that song called? Rock and Roll Mood, I think is what it was. And they did a great job. That was more of a blue-eyed soul. So in my mind, going into it, before I even go any further with this conversation, I felt that I had a singer who could do a diverse type of songs, give credibility to it, and perhaps help him to live his dream, of becoming a solo artist.
Mm-hmm. And in a very large way, it sounds like you did that. But with you wanting to be primarily a producer, curator of artists, if you will, was it difficult for you to be in the spotlight as half of Loggins and Messina? Was that difficult for you at first?
Well, the only thing that was difficult is that I just didn't want to be on the road anymore.
Right.
And when Clive Davis heard the demos that I had cut on the album, he said, "I love these demos." He said, "But it sounds like you're playing a lot on it." And I said, "Well, I am." And he said, "Well, what are your plans?" And I said, "Well, I want to help him put the band together, which we've almost got done now, and help him getting out on the road. He has no agent. He has an attorney, but he has no manager, and there's a lot of things that need to be done if this record's going to be a success. And it's a team effort. I've always believed that, still believe it. You got to have the right manager, you got to have the right agent, you got to have the right record company who wants to support the process. And he had the record company, but he needed all the other pieces, which he had not been able to establish on his own up until the time I met him. So there was a lot of work putting the band together, a lot of work presenting him, trying to find a manager. I went to several people who were not interested in him. Larry Fitzgerald had been working with Jim Curcio with Chicago. They had an organization. They didn't want him. The management that I had for Poco, which is Larry Shipman and Larson, they weren't interested in him. So when we got to the point of making the record, I told Clive, we've got to have a manager in order to coordinate, the tours and things that need to be done. I think Clive made a couple of calls, and particularly to Larry Larson, and said, "Listen, we want to put some effort behind this group. Jimmy's going to go out and help him by presenting his audiences of Buffalo, Springfield, and Poco. Do you want to be a part of this or not?" And I guess they finally thought, well, why not if there's going to be support? And so Larry Larson got involved, which I think was great, because Larry had the enthusiasm to want to make this project happen. And as I've gone through some of my old records, I realized he had done so much to help this band by just looking at some of the letters that had been sent out. And also when Kenny went into his own career, the management company was there to continue to support him, which I think was part of the great reason why there was a breakthrough early in his career.
Mm-hmm. And Kenny Loggins summed you up as well as I can remember. He said, I learned my recording ethic from Jim Messina. He was a master at recording and getting it perfect. Doing it until we get it perfect. And he said that you hear on that first album, it was perfect, and it was painstaking because it took forever, but it was perfect when you play it. And that's where Kenny says that his perfectionism as an artist, he learned from you on doing that first album. And you had some fantastic people in your band. The saxophone player Al Garth, just a wonderful group of people. So that's how he sums you up. How would you sum up Kenny Loggins? What did you learn from him, if you haven't already said when you were talking about him?
Well, one of the things that I learned as I was working with him is that he put minute to hour to the effort that I put into him. He never said no. I can't do that, or I won't do that. He was a great partner, and I know that he at times would wonder, can't we just live with this? And for me, I would say no, because we need to. Basically, the whole idea was to create a band for him, which I was able to do. Larry Sims and Merle Briganti were in a group called the Sunshine Company, and the group had busted up, and they had opened for Poco. So I was aware of their talent and their abilities, and also their availability. Al Garth lived below me in an apartment, and I would hear him play sax and his violin, but he was a computer programmer, and that's what he was doing when I found him. John Clark was a young man of 20 years old, not even legal to sign a contract, but was such a brilliant player. Michael Amardian was a keyboard player that Kenny had worked with in the past and had brought in, which was a wonderful addition to putting that band together, because everyone had a sense of music, from country to folk to rock and roll, and even to a little bit of light jazz, which we didn't play around with too much in those days. But everybody was just well suited to do this music. But the important thing was to create an album that when Kenny walked out on stage was something they wanted to hear. And why would they want to hear that? Well, I rehearsed it in the form in which we would be performing it. So when people heard it and they came and seen us perform, it was the album. And as you know, when you told me when you first started off with Call It Love, it hits you in such a way that you want to hear that music again. And when you go to see a performer perform, when I do anyway, I want to hear what I heard recorded. I believe when an artist changes things around because they're bored, or if they don't have the musicianship to be able to create it the way it is, and many times they do themselves a great disservice. And what I didn't want to have happen was there an album come out with Kenny Loggins that he couldn't duplicate on stage, like so many artists do, because they use the studio musicians because they're not players themselves, or maybe they don't want to have a band, but they're hoping to get a hit record. And that can work. But what is most stable and what, as a career, in my opinion, is a performing artist who can go out and perform the material year after year after year and have people still want to come and see them. That's what I wanted for Kenny, and that's why it took so long to get that first album, because that first album is your calling card for the rest of your life.
Yes. And 8 albums, 16 million records, and 55 years later, here you are on the phone talking to me, of all the people in the world. And I'm a $12 a week newspaper columnist. Let me tell you, I don't take that lightly. I'm very honored, sir. And this means more to me than I can put into words. Can you tell me, you've had such a fabulous and amazing career, what work, if any, that you could peg down are you proudest of?
I got to tell you that everything I've ever done, I'm proud of. I don't have an album that I regret.
I believe that.
The only album that I regret and had nothing to do with the person is that our first Picking Up the Pieces album, we had a wonderful engineer who was not ready for the kind of music we were doing, and he just didn't hear it. The second album we recorded with a guy named Alex Casanegas, and he got it. The sonics and the sounds were what I had wanted the first engineer. So you say, well, I'm an engineer, why didn't I just make it happen? Well, in those days, Columbia Records had a studio in Hollywood. And if you were signed, I was signed as a Columbia artist, I was not allowed to touch the board by the union regulations. If I did, they could file a case against me and I could lose my record royalties. So it was I could do was to ask somebody to do a certain thing. And when I'd ask them to do a certain thing, well, you can't do that. I said, no, you can. I do it all the time. Oh, well, you don't want to do that. And so the first album with Poco was a disappointment sonically. I knew that it could be done better, but when we finally got the new engineer there that had been hired, who understood the sonics and understood the patching that I was asking him to do, and why I wanted compressors, and why I wanted limiters, and why I wanted to overdrive the first stage of a preamp in order to get a distorted sound, wasn't hurting the equipment, but the other engineers thought I was. And that was that transition in 1968 between the wonderful performing artists like, Andy Williams and Frank Sinatra and all the people who were doing recordings at Studio A at Columbia, and the transition from, Buffalo, Springfield to Poco, where we were using distortion to create sounds that our audiences wanted to hear. So it was a tough transition time, but the gods of all gods, I guess, made it happen to where I could finally get somebody in there who understood how to sonically create the sounds through the patching techniques that I needed to have done in order to make it work.
In music and in life, and you've had such a very rich life, what would you say is the greatest lesson that you've learned?
Well, the greatest lesson that I've learned as an artist, as a producer, is that I should have, even though I had a great understanding, I should have been more involved in the economics of how my own personal monies were being administrated by business managers. And I learned over the years that, and especially about 6 years ago, someone who actually, embezzled us for 20 years. And when I went through the process of finding out what's happening with, with forensic accounting and district attorneys and stuff like that, I realized that it's so easy for someone who is dishonest in that field to take advantage of an artist or a producer. And doctors, the same things happen with doctors.
Absolutely.
They're more focused on surgery. Like I'm more focused on arrangements, that you trust people to do things for you. In the past 8 years, I've taken over most of the management of my finances. I still have a CPA, but I oversee the money as it comes in, make sure the taxes are paid, make sure that, money is put out there for my children's school, and we have savings, and first and foremost that our taxes are paid. And I make less money than I've ever made in my life, and I have more money in the bank. And that tells me something, and I can only say that we can't stop trusting people who manage our financial affairs, but we can certainly verify that in fact and indeed they're doing the right job. But I think if you're going to, as a young artist, if you're going to start making money, try to do as much of the management yourself. Yes, it's a pain in the ass, but spend it 2 or 3 hours a day. Make sure your bank accounts are correct, and your savings accounts are correct, and you're saving money for your taxes, or you're making sure the money is there to pay them. I think it's, in the days when I first started out, there was a 50% tax rate. And one of my attorneys said to me, he says, I pay the 50 cents. You're going to have to do it anyway. And the longer you wait, the more you're going to have to come up with to meet that 50 cents. Just pay it, get out of the way, and that way you can go to sleep at night and not worry about, losing money because you didn't pay your taxes. And so I think the toughest thing that I've had to go through in my life is earning the money and not knowing that it was being spent correctly, and find out that it hadn't been, and then having to go through and make up for all the loss that somebody else created that I had no idea that was going on. I encourage my daughter, go to school, take business, take economics, and understand how the world works in that way, so that you can go to bed at night and not worry whether or not you're going to wake up the next day and be broke.
Right. And as a human being, as a husband and a father, obviously it's difficult to balance that when you're on the road and working so much. What's the greatest lesson as a human being that you've learned from the life you've had?
Well, I think the biggest lesson I've learned, and it's humbling, is that I'm no different than I've ever been. And to put my head above others or to think I'm better than somebody else is a tragic mistake to make. I think I enjoy, to be honest with you, being around carpenters and plumbers and people who make a living with their hands more than I do being around, famous people. I think famous people are wonderful, and most of them are good folks, but I think there's a disease in our industry, narcissism, that really has destroyed a lot of relationships and brought a lot of good people who started out seeing life the right way and make too much money and mix that with a lot of narcissism, and it's some of these people are just really difficult to be around, and I just felt in my life I didn't want to be one of those people, and I hope that I haven't disappointed anybody in that respect, but it's hard for me to have friends that I know that have made a lot of money and had a lot of success, and narcissism has just eaten them alive.
It is a tragic disease of human nature, unfortunately. And but I will tell you that when you come to Wytheville on March the 12th, you will meet as common people as there are in the world. I've been happy to live here all of my 40 years and to be accepted and taken care of despite my disability. I have a wonderful wife and we have a beautiful daughter, which is the greatest blessing I can receive. So I think, I hope anyway, that you will be very impressed with the people that you meet when you visit us on March 12th. And I'm going to do everything I can to help get you a sold-out show. And I hope that you'll return again, because, as I said, I've been doing this for 20 years, and this is one of the greatest honors of my career. Bless you for taking so much time with me, sir.
You bet, and I hope to see you at the show.
Yes, I have a front row seat, so I'll be looking. I'll be anxious to hear you perform. Yes.
All right, my friend, I got to run, but thank you so much.